A heavy knock broke through the sound of rain hammering against the old cabin walls. Adam rose from his chair, his hand instinctively gripping the rifle by his side. The storm outside screamed like a living thing as he slid the latch open. The door flew back with the wind, and a figure collapsed onto the wooden floor. A woman, tall, strong, wrapped in torn buckskin soaked through with rain, lay shivering, her bare feet bleeding and raw. Mud and blood mixed beneath her where she fell. She tried to lift her head, her eyes dark and full of desperation. Her voice came out as nothing more than a broken whisper. "Please let me stay. I won't make it through the night out there. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from." This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Adam froze, his rifle still raised. Every thought in his head told him not to trust her. She was Apache, and the world had taught him that meant danger. But something about her trembling shoulders and the way her voice cracked made him lower the gun. His heart, tired as it was, still remembered mercy. He knelt beside her, placing his rough hand on her icy shoulder. "All right," he said quietly. "Come in." He pulled her inside and slammed the door shut against the wind. She collapsed again, breathless, while he hurried to stoke the dying fire and draped the thickest blanket he owned around her shoulders. The flames flickered, painting her rain-soaked face in trembling orange light. When dawn came, pale sunlight slipped through the gaps in the cabin walls. The woman lay curled up near the fire, breathing slow but steady. Her name, he later learned, was Maya. Her long black hair was tangled, her skin bruised, her feet carefully bandaged in strips torn from Adam's own shirt. She stirred awake, eyes flashing with panic, and sat up fast as if ready to fight. "Where am I?" she gasped. Adam raised both hands, calm and open. "You're safe. You came to my door last night, half dead." She glanced around, realizing she had been tended to. The fear in her eyes didn't fade completely, but something softened. She looked at him like a wild animal unsure whether to run or stay. He passed her a small bowl of warm water. "Here, drink slow." She took it with trembling hands, sipped carefully, then looked at him again. "Why did you help me?" Adam hesitated. His voice came low, almost a growl. "Because I've lost enough people in this life. I won't lose another at my doorstep." She didn't answer right away. The fire popped softly between them. Then her voice came small, nearly lost in the wind that crept through the cracks. "I ran," she said. "A man tried to hurt me. I stabbed him. My people think I'm cursed. They said death follows me everywhere I go." Adam looked into her dark eyes carrying years of pain, and said, "If you're still breathing, it's not a curse. It's will." Maya stared at the floor, silent for a long time. Then, almost in a whisper, "I have nowhere else to go." "Then stay," Adam said simply. She looked at him, unsure if she had heard right. "For how long?" He met her eyes, steady and kind. "As long as you need." Outside, the storm finally died. Snow began to fall softly through the pine trees, covering the cabin in quiet white. Inside, two strangers sat near the fire, both too wounded to trust, yet too human not to hope. Something small and fragile had started to grow, the kind of peace that no storm could ever wash away. Days passed slowly. Adam worked on the fence that the winter wind had broken while Maya, wrapped in a heavy coat, sat nearby, rewrapping her healing feet. Every morning, he left a bowl of warm porridge on the table before heading out. By noon, she would practice walking again, bracing herself against the cabin wall, pushing through the pain without a sound. After 3 days, she limped out to where Adam was chopping wood. Her eyes carried the same strength as the first night, but now they held fire too. "Let me help," she said. He shook his head. "Your legs aren't ready. You should rest." "Hurt means I'm still alive," she answered. Without waiting, she picked up a heavy log nearly as thick as his arm. Adam stopped, half in surprise, half in respect. From that day on, they worked side by side. He split the wood, she stacked it neatly in the shed. He fixed the roof, she held the ladder steady. He taught her how to make stew. She showed him how to preserve meat the Apache way, with salt and smoke. One evening, as snow drifted past the window, they sat across from each other by the fire. Adam stirred the pot slowly. If the world ever quiets down, he said, where would you go? Maya looked down at her bowl. Do you want me to leave? Adam didn't answer. The only sound was the soft whistle of the wind outside. She set the bowl aside. Your cabin used to hold one person. Now it holds two. If you let me, I could help make it warmer. He looked up. For a man who had known only loss, something in her words cracked the wall around his heart. It already feels warmer, he said softly. In that moment, neither of them smiled, but their eyes met long enough to know that loneliness had finally begun to fade. The snow had stopped, but the cold still clung to the world like it refused to leave. Maya woke to the sound of the wind pushing gently against the window shutters. The fire had burned low, its embers glowing like faint heartbeats in the dark. Adam was already outside, repairing the broken hinges of the barn door. She could hear the rhythm of his hammer, steady and patient, a sound that somehow felt safe. For a long while, she just sat there, watching the thin smoke rise from the dying fire. It felt strange, this quiet. For years, every morning of her life had started with shouting, with the fear of survival. Now, the silence carried something unfamiliar, peace. She touched the bandages on her feet and winced, but the pain didn't scare her anymore. It reminded her that she was still here, still alive. When Adam came back in, snow dusted his coat and hair. You should eat, he said simply, setting a bowl of porridge on the table. Maya smiled faintly. You always leave food like you're feeding a ghost. He glanced up, a rare spark of humor in his eyes. Well, you were half dead when I found you. Guess I'm just keeping the ghost from fading. Her smile deepened for the first time since she'd arrived. The warmth of the fire reached her cheeks, and for a second, she forgot how long she'd been running. Later that day, she tried walking again, holding onto the wall. Every step felt like stepping through memory. Every bruise, every chase, every night she'd slept under the open sky. Adam watched from the corner of his eye, pretending not to worry. When she stumbled, he dropped the tool in his hand and rushed over, steadying her with both arms. I've got you, he said, his voice rough but gentle. She looked up at him, breathless. You can let go. He didn't. Not yet. For a moment, neither moved. His hand stayed around her arm. Her heart pounded in her chest. And somewhere deep inside, something that had been frozen for years began to thaw. That night, the storm returned. Wind howled like ghosts outside the cabin, and snow pressed hard against the walls. Adam threw more logs into the fire, but the cold still crept in through the cracks. Maya sat near the flames, wrapped in 2 blankets, shivering. Her lips trembled. Her hands were purple from the chill. Adam noticed and got up quietly. He placed another blanket over her shoulders. Staying warm is easier when you stay awake, he said. She gave a tired smile. Then talk to me. He hesitated. It had been years since he'd spoken to anyone like this. What do you want to talk about? Tell me something true, she whispered. He leaned back in his chair. The truth is, I stopped believing people could change until you knocked on my door. She looked into the fire, blinking fast, fighting tears that wanted to fall. I'm not pretty, she said softly, almost to herself. I'm scarred, broken. Adam turned to her, his eyes steady. I don't need pretty. I need real. I need you. Her breath caught in her throat. Those words, simple, raw, unpolished, cut through years of shame and loneliness like sunlight through the clouds. Lightning flashed outside, and for a heartbeat, the cabin glowed in blue-white light. Then darkness again. She scooted closer to the fire, and Adam sat beside her. The roof creaked in the wind. A loose board slammed hard, making Maya flinch and lean instinctively into him. He caught her without thinking, his arms sliding around her shoulders. Are you scared? He asked. She shook her head. No, it's just the first time I've ever had a place to stay. Those words hit him harder than any storm. He looked down at her, this woman who had survived more than he could imagine, and felt something shift inside him. He wasn't a soldier or a drifter anymore. Not in that moment. He was just a man trying to keep her warm. She placed her hand over his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath his shirt. Your heart, she said quietly. It's cold, but still beating. He didn't answer. He only pulled her closer. The fire cracked, their breaths mingled, and for the first time in years, Adam felt warmth that didn't come from wood or flame. When their lips met, it wasn't rushed. It was gentle, almost afraid. But it was real, the kind of kiss that makes silence disappear. Afterward, Maya rested her forehead against his shoulder. "If you want me to stay," she whispered, "I will. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I want to be here." Adam tightened his arms around her, his voice breaking softly. "Stay with me." Outside, snow buried the world in white silence. Inside the small cabin, two hearts, scarred and trembling, finally found warmth that no winter could take away. Morning light crept slowly through the cracks between the cabin logs, falling across Adam's face. He woke to the quiet crackle of the dying fire and the soft rhythm of Maya's breathing beside him. For a moment, he didn't move. The world outside could have been burning, and he wouldn't have cared. There was a stillness inside him he hadn't known in years, the kind that makes a man realize how long he's been running from his own loneliness. Maya stirred and opened her eyes. Her dark lashes flickered in the light, and when she saw him watching her, she gave a small, uncertain smile. "You're staring," she said, her voice hoarse from sleep. "Just making sure you're still real," he answered. She sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I don't think I've ever felt real before." Adam smiled faintly, then stood and tossed another log into the fire. "You will now." The day passed quietly. Snow melted off the roof, dripping in slow, steady rhythms. Adam chopped wood out back while Maya swept the cabin and reheated stew from the night before. It wasn't much, but it was life. Every small noise, a door creaking, a bowl clinking, carried the soft echo of home. By noon, Adam heard hooves in the distance. His body went rigid before his mind caught up. He set down the axe, squinting toward the tree line. Dust and movement. Riders. His heart sank. When the pounding grew louder, Maya stepped out onto the porch, her face pale. She recognized the rhythm. "They found me," she whispered. Adam turned, his hand already reaching for the rifle propped against the wall. "Go inside." "I'm not hiding," she said firmly. Her voice was steel now, not fear. Four riders broke through the mist, Apaches dressed in worn hides and streaked with paint. The tallest one pulled his horse to a stop and glared down at Maya. "You're coming back," he said coldly. "The council wants judgment. You spilled blood. Now blood will be paid." Maya stood her ground. "The man I stabbed tried to take my life. I only defended myself." The rider spat. "You've brought death since the day you were born. You're cursed. You bring bad luck to everyone who shelters you." Adam stepped forward, planting himself between them. His voice came low and hard. "This is my land, my home. No one lays a hand on her here." The men glared, hands twitching near their knives. One sneered. "You defend her? She's a savage. You think she's worth anything?" Adam's grip tightened on his rifle. "She's worth everything to me." Silence fell, sharp and tense. Then one of the riders drew a knife, the blade flashing in the pale sunlight. Maya didn't flinch. She reached for a piece of firewood near the porch, gripping it tight, standing shoulder to shoulder with Adam. Before anyone could move, Adam raised his rifle and fired. The shot hit the dirt inches from the lead horse's hooves. The animal reared, screaming. "That was my warning," Adam said, his voice calm, his eyes cold. "You'll get only one." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the leader scowled. "You won't hide her forever. Our people will come for her." "Then they'll find me waiting," Adam said quietly. The riders turned their horses and disappeared into the white horizon. The air that followed felt heavy, the kind that presses against your lungs. Maya turned to him, her hands trembling. "You didn't have to do that." Adam lowered the rifle. "It wasn't for you," he said. "It was for what's right." Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time in her life, someone had stood between her and danger. Not for gain, not out of pity, but because they cared. She blinked hard, trying to stop the tears from spilling, but one escaped anyway. Adam reached up and brushed it away with his thumb. "You're safe now." She looked at him for a long time, then stepped forward and rested her forehead against his chest. "No one's ever said that to me before." He wrapped his arms around her and held her close. Outside, the snow began to fall again, slow, quiet, endless. Inside the cabin, something even rarer happened. Two broken people began to believe, for the first time, that maybe they weren't broken at all. That night, the fire burned bright and steady. The wind pressed against the walls but couldn't get in. Adam sat with his back against the hearth while Maya leaned against his shoulder. They didn't speak for a long time. Words weren't needed. The silence said everything about fear, about safety, about love slowly finding its voice. He glanced down at her, her eyes half closed, a soft peace in her expression. For years, he'd built this cabin as a fortress to keep the world out. But now, sitting there with her in his arms, he realized it had never been a prison. It had been waiting for her. The next few mornings felt softer than winter had any right to be. The storm passed, leaving the land wrapped in silence. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, it painted the snow in gold, and for the first time in months, Adam's cabin didn't feel like a tomb. Smoke rose from the chimney. The air smelled of pine, stew, and something warm that wasn't just fire. It was life coming back. Maya sat by the window, her hair loose around her shoulders, watching a small bird hop along the porch rail. She smiled faintly. It had been years since she'd smiled without pain behind it. Adam, sitting near the fire, sharpening his knife, glanced up. "Haven't seen you smile like that before," he said. She turned toward him, her cheeks flushing. "I forgot how." He chuckled softly, the sound deep and kind. "Guess it's coming back to you." Maya looked down at her hands. The bandages were gone, her skin rough but healing. "It feels strange," she said, "being still, not running, not waiting for someone to hurt me." Adam set the knife aside and leaned forward. "You don't have to run anymore, Maya. You're safe here." Her voice trembled, quiet but full of truth. "You keep saying that, but safety, it's something I don't know how to trust." Adam nodded slowly. "Then let it take its time. I'll be here when you do." Something in her chest loosened. It wasn't love, not yet. It was the fragile feeling that maybe love was possible. She studied him quietly, the way his eyes softened when he spoke, how his hands, scarred and strong, always moved with care, never force. That afternoon, Adam showed her how to clean his old rifle. She watched, curious, as he guided her hands gently over the metal. "You've held one before?" he asked. She shook her head. "Only bows and knives. Guns, they don't belong in the lives of people like me." He smiled faintly. "Maybe they don't belong in anyone's. But out here, they're the difference between living and not." When her fingers brushed his, she froze. He didn't move away. Their eyes met, and for a second the whole room went quiet. The fire, the wind, the ticking of his old clock. Everything stopped except their breathing. Then she laughed, nervous and soft. "You make it seem so easy." Adam tilted his head. "Nothing about this is easy." Later that night, after dinner, she found him sitting on the porch, staring into the forest. The moon hung low, turning the snow silver. She stepped outside, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "You thinking again?" she asked, teasing gently. He smiled without looking at her. "Always." "About what?" "About how a man can live his whole life building walls," he said, "then meet someone who makes him want to tear them all down." She stopped beside him, her breath visible in the cold air. "You think I'm that someone?" He turned to her slowly. "I don't think. I know." Maya looked down, her throat tightening. "No one's ever said something like that to me before." Adam reached for her hand, his touch careful, like she might vanish if he pressed too hard. "Then I'll say it again until you believe it." The words fell between them like a promise neither of them knew how to make yet, but both needed to hear. Inside, the fire was burning low, casting long shadows across the walls. They went back in together, and when she sat near the flames, Adam knelt to add more wood. For a moment, their faces were inches apart. Her eyes glowed in the firelight, dark, soft, uncertain. "Why are you always so kind to me?" she asked quietly. He thought about it for a long moment, then said, "Because I know what it's like to be cold, and I don't ever want you to feel that way again." Something in her broke then, not in pain but release, the kind of breaking that heals. Her lips trembled, her hands shaking as she whispered, I used to believe kindness was something people only gave when they wanted something back. Adam shook his head slowly. Then maybe it's time you met someone who just means it. Maya looked at him for a long moment. No words, just the sound of her breath and the fire and the quiet truth sitting heavy in the room. Two lonely souls, both learning how to be human again. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than a whisper. You make me feel like I belong here. He smiled gently. You do. And for the first time since she could remember, Maya believed it. Outside, the last of the snow melted from the roof, drop by drop, until only the forest quiet remained. Inside the cabin, warmth grew, not the kind that burns, but the kind that stays. Spring crept in quietly, soft as breath. The snow pulled back from the pines, the rivers woke up, and the land began to smell like life again. Adam and Maya worked side by side most days now, not speaking much, yet somehow saying everything. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It felt full, like the earth just before rain. One morning, Adam was chopping wood out back when Maya stepped out of the cabin. Her hair was loose, catching the wind. She watched him swing the axe, his movements strong, deliberate. For a moment, she just stood there, thinking how this man, this stranger, had turned her fear into something that felt almost like peace. When he noticed her, he lowered the axe. You should be resting. I'm done resting, she said, walking closer. I've rested half my life while people decided what I was worth. He leaned on the axe handle, studying her face. And what are you worth? She met his eyes without hesitation. Enough to fight for. The words hit him deep. He'd seen men die for pride, for revenge, for gold. But hearing her say that a woman who'd fought for her right to exist, it was different. It was truth. He nodded slowly. You're damn right you are. That afternoon, they repaired the fence together. The boards were splintered and rough from winter, but they worked until the sun dipped low. At one point, Maya's hand slipped and a nail sliced her palm. Adam rushed over, taking her hand gently. You need to be careful. She laughed under her breath, though her eyes watered from the sting. You worry too much. Someone has to, he said, wrapping her hand in his bandana. Maya looked at him, her expression softening. No one ever has. He didn't answer right away. He just held her gaze, then said quietly, then they were fools. The air between them shifted, heavy and electric. Her eyes glistened, and he had to look away just to breathe again. That evening, they ate in silence. The firelight made shadows dance across the room, flickering over their faces. Maya watched the flames as she spoke. Do you ever think about the past? Every damn day, he admitted. It sits in my chest like a stone. What happened to you? She asked gently. Adam hesitated, his eyes darkening. I lost someone. Long ago. My wife. She got sick. I tried everything, sold everything, to save her, but it wasn't enough. Maya's voice came soft. You loved her deeply. He nodded, eyes glistening. I still do. But the thing about grief is it doesn't leave when you want it to. It just learns how to hide better. She reached across the table, her hand trembling as it found his. You did what love asks of us. You stayed, even when it hurt. He looked at her hand resting on his, then at her face. And you? What happened before that night you found me? Maya's eyes clouded. I ran, she whispered. From my people, from the pain. They said I was cursed, that anyone who stood near me would die. And you believe them? I didn't know what else to believe. Adam leaned closer, his voice rough but steady. Listen to me. You're not cursed, Maya. You're proof that pain doesn't win unless we let it. Her lips parted. The tears she'd held back for so long finally spilled. Why do you care so much about me? He held her gaze, his voice low, burning. Because for the first time in years, I care about something that matters. Maya covered her face, a quiet sob escaping her. He stood, walked around the table, and knelt beside her. He didn't try to hush her tears. He just stayed there, hand on her shoulder, letting her break in peace. When she finally looked at him again, her voice was raw. You think we're meant to fix each other? He shook his head. No, but maybe we're meant to remind each other what being alive feels like. The room fell silent again, but it wasn't empty. It was sacred, Two souls, too bruised for promises, too scarred for fairy tales, sitting in the small space where healing begins. Not because they forgot their pain, but because they finally had someone to share it with. Maya leaned forward, her forehead against his. "If I ever start running again," she whispered, "will you come find me?" Adam smiled faintly. "You won't have to run. Not anymore." Outside, the night wind swept through the pine trees, whispering like a prayer neither of them could speak. Inside the cabin, they sat close, their shadows touching even when their hands didn't. It wasn't love that night, not yet, but it was everything love needs to grow. Days turned into weeks, and the world outside began to bloom again. The ice melted from the streams, wildflowers pushed through the thawing ground, and the forest that once felt like a cage now felt like a promise. Adam and Maya had built something between them, fragile but real, a quiet rhythm of shared mornings, shared work, shared breath. One evening, as the sun fell behind the hills, Adam sat on the porch sharpening his knife. The sky glowed red and gold, stretching across the horizon. Maya stepped outside with 2 mugs of tea, her bare feet silent against the wood. She handed him one and sat beside him. Neither spoke for a while. "You ever think about the future?" she asked finally, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Adam took a slow sip, his jaw tight. "I stopped thinking that far ahead a long time ago." "Why?" He looked at her, his voice low. "Because everything I planned for got taken away." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Maybe it's time you start again." He gave a small laugh. "And what would I even plan for?" Maya turned to him, her gaze steady. "Something that makes you want to stay alive." The words landed deep. Adam looked down at the mug in his hands, steam curling in the air. "Maybe I already found that." Their eyes met, and neither of them looked away. Later that night, they sat by the fire again. The flames danced, soft and warm. Maya broke the silence. "You said you lost your wife. Do you still dream about her?" "Sometimes," he said. "Mostly the nights before she got sick. She'd hum this little tune while cooking. When she died, the house went quiet, and I couldn't stand the sound of silence anymore. That's when I left everything behind." Maya's eyes softened. "I know what it's like to live haunted by ghosts that don't even try to leave." He looked at her, curious. "Who haunts you?" She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "The people I couldn't save. The ones who thought I brought them misfortune. Every time something went wrong, they blamed me. When the crops failed, when someone got hurt. I started believing them after a while." Adam leaned closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Don't you ever say that again. You didn't bring death, you survived it." She stared into the fire, tears glistening in her eyes. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he admitted, "but truth never is. The world tells us we're broken, cursed, unworthy. But the world's wrong, Maya. You're proof of that." She smiled faintly, though her lips trembled. "You talk like a man who's lost everything." He met her gaze. "Maybe I have, but maybe that's why I can finally see what matters." Her breath caught. She set her mug down and whispered, "What does matter to you, Adam?" He looked at her for a long time, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "You do." The air went still, the kind of stillness that feels alive. She blinked, her heartbeat so loud she could almost hear it. "You don't have to say that," she murmured. "I'm not saying it because I have to," he replied, voice soft but sure. "I'm saying it because it's true." Maya's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't from pain. She reached across the small space between them and took his hand. Her voice shook. "All my life, I thought I was poison. But you make me feel human again." Adam squeezed her hand gently. "That's because you are. You always were. You just needed someone to remind you." For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then, through tears, she whispered, "You saved me that night." Adam shook his head. "No, you save yourself. I just opened the door." She laughed softly, the sound fragile but real. "You really think we can make something good out here, after everything we've been through?" He smiled. "Maybe the best things are born out of the broken ones." Maya leaned in closer, her forehead resting against his. "Then let's be broken together," she whispered. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "No," he said gently. "Let's be whole, together." Outside, The wind carried the scent of rain. Inside, the fire burned low, wrapping them in the kind of warmth that doesn't fade. For the first time in their lives, they weren't running from the past or dreading the future. They were just here, two people who had learned that love doesn't heal the scars. It simply makes them worth carrying. The following week brought a strange quiet to the mountains, the kind of stillness that feels like a warning. The forest held its breath, the sky gray and heavy. Adam felt it before he saw it. That same pressure in his chest he'd known in war, right before everything went wrong. He was stacking wood on the porch when the sound came, distant at first, then sharper, closer. Hoofbeats. 4 of them. Maya stepped out of the cabin, her face instantly draining of color. She didn't need to look twice. "It's them," she whispered. Adam's hand went straight to the rifle leaning by the door. "Get inside." She shook her head, her voice trembling but steady. "No, I won't hide again." The riders broke through the fog. Apaches, faces painted in red and black, eyes hard as flint. They reined in their horses just yards from a porch. The tallest dismounted, his expression full of contempt. "Maya, the chief demands your return. Blood for blood. You defied our law. You'll stand before the council." Maya stepped forward, shoulders squared. "I already bled. For the man who tried to destroy me. For every night I ran through storms just to stay alive. I owe you nothing." The man's jaw tightened. "You bring death with you. You brought it here too." Adam stepped down from the porch, standing between them, his rifle resting easily in his hands. "You don't decide who lives or dies on this land. Not while I'm here." The Apache man sneered. "You protect her? She's cursed." Adam's voice cut through the cold air. "She's human. That's all that matters." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then the man spat on the ground. "She doesn't belong with you." Adam's grip tightened. "She belongs where she's free." The leader's eyes flicked to his men. One reached for a knife. The motion was quick, but Adam was quicker. He fired into the dirt inches from the man's boots. The sound cracked through the still air like thunder. "That was your warning," Adam said, his voice calm, his eyes unblinking. "The next one won't miss." The riders hesitated, anger burning in their faces. The leader leaned forward, his voice low with hate. "You can't protect her forever. One day, she'll have to face what she's done." Adam took a slow step closer. "And one day, you'll have to live with what you've become." The man's stare faltered for just a heartbeat. Then he turned his horse sharply, motioning for the others to follow. The 4 of them rode off into the mist, their figures swallowed by the forest. When they were gone, silence fell heavy. Adam lowered his rifle, his breath steady but his hands trembling slightly. Maya stood frozen on the porch, her eyes glistening. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. He looked up at her, jaw still clenched. "It wasn't for you. It was for what's right." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't move. "No one's ever stood up for me before. Not once." Adam's voice softened. "Then it's about damn time someone did." She stepped down, closing the space between them. "They'll come back," she whispered. "Then let them," he said. "They'll find a man who's done running." Something broke inside her then, the part that had always waited for people to leave. She reached up, her fingers brushing the edge of his coat. "Why do you keep risking everything for me?" He looked at her for a long time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because you're worth everything I have left." Her breath caught. "You mean that?" "I've never meant anything more." Maya stared at him, tears spilling freely now. "You make me believe in things I stopped believing in a long time ago." He cupped her face gently, his thumb wiping away a tear. "Then believe again." The wind picked up, blowing through the trees, scattering the ashes from the morning fire. In the fading light, they stood there, 2 people against the world, bruised but unbroken, bound not by promises but by choice. That night, the cabin was quiet except for the soft crackle of the fire. Maya sat near it, wrapped in his coat, staring into the flames. "When you said you'd stop running," she murmured, "I didn't realize you meant with me." Adam looked at her, his eyes tired but peaceful. "Running's easy. Staying, that's the hard part." She smiled faintly. "Then let's stay." He reached out, took her hand, and pulled her gently against his chest. The sound of her heartbeat filled the space between them, steady and alive. Outside, the moon rose over the pines. Inside the cabin, love didn't need words anymore. It lived quietly in the warmth of two hands that refused to let go. Spring melted fully into summer, and the valley turned green again. The rivers sang louder, and the fields that once held silence now carried the hum of life. Adam and Maya had built a world of their own, small, fragile, but real. The kind of life that doesn't make the world stop, but makes it worth waking up for. One morning, Maya was standing outside near the pine trees, her hands resting over her stomach, when Adam stepped onto the porch. The early light caught her face, soft, calm, full of something he hadn't seen before. "You're up early?" he said. She turned to him, smiling gently. "I couldn't sleep." He tilted his head, noticing the quiet glow in her eyes. "You all right?" She hesitated for a breath, then said softly, I think we're going to have a child." For a moment, Adam didn't move. The words sank into him like sunlight through cold soil. The axe he'd been holding slipped from his hand and thudded into the dirt. He stepped forward, his heart pounding, his voice barely there. "A child?" Maya nodded, tears in her eyes. "Ours." He reached her in 2 long steps, his hands trembling as they found hers. "You're sure?" She nodded again, smiling through tears. "I've never been more sure of anything." Adam pressed his forehead to hers. Laughter and disbelief tangled in his breath. "Maya, I don't even have the words." "You don't need them," she whispered. "Just stay." And he did. In the days that followed, Adam worked harder than ever. He built an extra room onto the cabin, patched the roof again, and repaired the fence by hand. Every board he nailed down was a promise, every drop of sweat a vow. Maya tended to a small garden behind the house, planting beans, herbs, and flowers she found by the stream. Life was simple, but it was theirs. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Adam brought out a small wooden box. Inside was an old silver ring, worn and dulled by time. He turned it in his hand, staring at it for a long while. "It belonged to my wife," he said quietly. "For years, I kept it because I couldn't let go. But holding on to ghosts, it's like living with a hand around your heart." Maya watched him silently as he walked out to the edge of the woods. Beneath a tall pine, he dug a small hole, placed the ring inside, and covered it with soil. When he stood, there were no tears, just a peace that hadn't touched him in years. He turned to her, voice low but steady. "From today on, I live for what's in front of me." Maya stepped closer, took his hand, and whispered, "And I'll make sure you never walk alone again." That night, they sat by the fire, her head resting against his shoulder. The cabin glowed warm around them. Outside, the forest whispered like it was blessing them both. She looked up at him and said softly, I used to think freedom meant leaving everyone behind. But I was wrong." He glanced down, his fingers brushing her hair. "What does it mean now?" She smiled faintly. "Freedom is staying where your heart belongs." Adam's eyes softened. "Then stay with me, every day." She answered not with words, but with a kiss, slow, certain, full of life. Months passed, and the cabin that had once been a refuge turned into a home. The walls that once echoed with loneliness now carried laughter. Maya's belly grew round, and every time Adam saw her hand resting on it, he felt the world make sense again. One morning, as they stood by the door watching the sunrise, Maya whispered, "Do you ever wonder why we survived? After everything." Adam took her hand, "Maybe so we could teach each other how to live." She looked up at him, eyes bright. "You think love can really fix broken people?" He smiled gently. "No, but it can give them a reason to keep trying." The light spilled over them, soft and golden, touching their faces like a blessing. Somewhere in the woods, a bird began to sing. In that moment, there was no past, no pain, only 2 souls who had finally stopped running. Because sometimes, love isn't about saving each other. It's about standing together long enough to remember what it feels like to be whole. And in that small cabin at the edge of the world, Adam and Maya proved one simple truth. You don't need perfection to build a home. You just need 2 hearts brave enough to stay. Moral: Love doesn't erase our scars. It teaches us to wear them without shame. It doesn't promise perfection, only presence. The strongest love isn't the kind that saves us, but the kind that stays, even when the world doesn't.